Good morning. This is a very hard room to quiet. Very good job. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 2022 Be Civic Summit, Turning Point CSR at a Crossroads. Thank you so much for joining us as we host our first ever fully hybrid summit presented by our friends at Delta Dental of Colorado and VF Corporation. DJ said this at the kickoff last night, but it is so amazing to be in a room of friends, colleagues, peers, soon to be friends in this really special space. I'm Liz Gardner. I'm the area manager for community and local government affairs for Xcel Energy, the proud chair of the 2022 summit, and a member of the Be Civic Advisory Board. It is great to be joined here in person with almost 300 peers, and thank you again to our virtual attendees who are tuning in truly from all over the country. Be Civic, an affiliate of the Denver Metro Chamber Leadership Foundation, empowers organizations like ours, like yours, and the people within them to build stronger businesses and stronger communities. And today is all about learning. It is all about collaboration. It is all about being inspired to help us move this important work forward so that we can build stronger businesses and, more importantly, a stronger community. The theme, Turning Point CSR at a Crossroads, was inspired by the place that many of us professionals find ourselves today. There is no doubt that this space that we live in has evolved from a function solely focused on philanthropic giving to one that oftentimes sits at the intersection of diversity, equity, and inclusion, environmental, social governance, employee engagement and well-being, and of course, philanthropic impact. It is integral that we collaborate across teams, across departments, across companies and industries to advance this work with purpose. Our work is at a crossroads, and it is our choice which direction we go, but we know we must do it authentically aligned with our core business functions, whatever those may be. We encourage you, and I know this is hard for all of us, to fully engage today with the conversations and learnings that are happening, and hopefully make a few new connections along the way. There's an amazing lineup of keynotes, one of whom we'll hear from in just a moment, 4 workshop blocks featuring 12 sessions on critically relevant topics for you to enjoy and for you to think about how you do this work differently. For our virtual attendees tuning in, please use the chat function to engage throughout the day in the Q&A section within the session to ask your questions. We'll have a tech team in each of our rooms that will monitor the chat so that you can participate and engage just as our in-person attendees are. You can find the help desk, the full agenda, and more details under that little lobby tab I'm sure you see on your screen right now. And over lunch, you can utilize the lounge and network tabs to virtually network with your peers online. And of course, you can learn more about our sponsors, other attendees, and the speakers on the tabs on the left. For our guests in the room here with us today, you can use the QR code that you'll find throughout the ballrooms to access the online platform for the full schedule, and the session recordings will all be available for you afterwards. So if you're having, decision dilemma on which session to go to, don't worry, you'll be able to watch everything afterwards. Over lunch, you'll have the opportunity to network with your peers and join in relevant conversations with our table topics. I personally love question games, despite my husband's interest in them. So you can participate in table topics. They'll be located throughout the ballroom. And if you'd like, you can get a complimentary headshot in the Cripple Creek Ballroom, just sort of out the hallway during the break. So if you're looking at your headshot and you're like, that looks nothing like me anymore, maybe now is the time to go get a new one. If you need any other assistance to make your day comfortable, special, and a memorable one, please don't hesitate to contact the team at the registration table for more support. Before I go any further, I would be remiss if I didn't take a minute, a little bit of personal privilege, to thank the team of Be Civic, particularly Jess Welzer and Olivia, who have truly been behind the scenes making this whole thing possible. Jess stepped into the leadership role of Be Civic just a handful of months ago and really has taken it by the reins and done an amazing job with today. So thank you so much. As we work to take more steps to be sustainable and conscious at the conference, you'll experience a couple of perhaps changes to other things than you've seen before. In lieu of swag bags, all of our attendees during lunch are going to receive via email a $20 gift card from our giving partner, Global Giving, to give to a charitable project of your choice. So look out for that email. I expect everybody to take advantage of it. We will be doing some giveaways throughout the day from our sponsors for those who share on social media, tag BeCivic, and use the hashtag BeCivicSummit. Engage virtually to our virtual friends. We'll have some giveaways for you. And then most importantly, take the post-summit survey to give us your feedback on the day. We will be providing an entirely vegetarian lunch and not distributing plastic water bottles. Our venues today and last night, thank you again, Davita, for hosting us, are top tier in their sustainability. So keep an eye out for different ways in which we've been thinking intentionally about how to bring today's summit to you. In addition to the amazing dedication of our volunteers, particularly the summit committee and my vice chair, Meredith, who's in the room over here, who made this possible, as well as the staff at BeCivic, we are so grateful for remarkable sponsors who are truly investing in this work, but also investing all across the state of Colorado to make our community stronger. So I'd like to particularly thank our presenting sponsors, VF Corporation and Delta Dental of Colorado. Our visionary sponsors, Bank of America, DaVita, RK, Southwest Airlines, Suncor, and Xcel Energy. Our welcome reception beverage sponsor, Molson Coors, and our community, and our community sponsors who are listed on the screen behind me. Thank you so much to all of you for being here today and for investing in this important work. Now, to bring such quality speakers, particularly this morning's keynote, who I'm so excited for us all to hear from, we must thank our sponsor, Bank of America. Bank of America has been an incredible partner and supporter of this event in the Metro Denver area, focused on local priorities and helping to build strong communities, including investments in environmental, social, and governance programs that help foster economic mobility in our community. And it is my pleasure to welcome to the stage Raju Patel, the Colorado President and Market Executive for Bank of America, who is going to introduce this morning's keynote. Raju is the president of Bank of America Colorado, working throughout the region to connect businesses, families, and individuals to Bank of America's banking, lending, and investment teams. In addition, as if that job wasn't enough, to the Colorado president role, Raju is the market executive for global commercial banking, Bank of America in the Colorado market. He leads a team of commercial bankers who partner across the bank to deliver a full suite of services and leads the efforts to direct the bank's resources to support local priorities. With that, Raju, thank you all. Oh, wait, hold on. I'll do this after.
Thank you, Liz. What a warm welcome. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you and help kick off this incredible day that's in store for you. As Liz said, my name is Raju Patel, and I'm the Colorado Market President, and I also lead our Colorado Global Commercial Banking team. So it's my job to deliver financial solutions to improve lives for our clients, employees, and communities where we live and work. From families creating better lives to communities and coalitions promoting the greater good. We support all kinds of efforts to build a brighter future. ESG, environmental, social, governance, principles that help define how Bank of America delivers responsible growth and contributes to the global economy. ESG helps us build trust and credibility as a company. And it's a place where people want to work, invest in, and do business with. So hopefully you'll want to do business with us. Over the next few hours, you'll have the opportunity to hear from how other companies are doing business for good. I encourage you to engage, ask questions, and think through how you'll put ideas into action in your own organization. Thank you to the Denver Metro Chamber and Be Civic for elevating all our efforts and encouraging all of us to do more. Like you, Bank of America believes that we can be successful as a for-profit corporation and deliver what society needs from us to work towards social justice, racial equality, and economic prosperity. So let's get started. I'm excited to introduce our first speaker. Our first keynote speaker is Aaron Dignan. Aaron is all about brave new work and how to reinvent your organization. Over the last 2.5 years, we've experienced new ways of doing business and working. And today, the world of work calls for change, centered around empowerment, potential trust, and transparency. Change is not easy. However, we'll get Aaron's help, and he'll share what he's learned on the front lines of cultural change and a better way of working. Aaron is the author of Brave New Work and also the founder of The Ready and Murmur. Everywhere he looks, Aaron Dignan sees the same issue. One of our most trusted and important institutions, I would say all of our most trusted and important institutions are struggling. They're confronted with the facts that scale and bureaucracy that once made them strong are liabilities in a constant era of change. For the past 10 years, he studied organizations and teams with a new way of working that prioritizes adaptivity and autonomy over efficiency and control. Aaron contends that teams everywhere need to join them in the future of work. Right after Aaron's keynote, we'll be joined on stage by Adib Khan for a fireside conversation. Adib Khan is the Chief Brand and Impact Officer for Delta Dental of Colorado and also the Executive Director of the Delta Dental of Colorado Foundation. In his dual role serving both organizations, Adib furthers the mission of the company through a targeted corporate social responsibility strategy and drives the foundation's focus on advancing oral health equity across Colorado. I can tell you personally, he's a social impact leader and corporate responsibility executive with a proven track record for advancing equity and opportunity throughout his career. Please make sure you stick around for the fireside chat with Aaron and Adib. And now it's my pleasure to welcome to the stage Aaron Dignan. Aaron?
Yeah, thank you. All right. Let's wake everybody up with a pop quiz. I'm going to share some ways of working with you, and I want you to think back on whether you've experienced them at work. Maybe in your current job, maybe in a prior job, maybe you heard about it from your spouse, what they're experiencing at work. And we'll just see what the pulse in the room looks like. So these are 5 ways of working. 1, insisting on doing things through the right channels. So never permitting shortcuts to be taken to expedite decisions. Number 2, referring matters to committee for further study and consideration, making sure those committees are as large as possible. Number 3, haggling over the precise wording of communications. This org announcement has to be perfect. Otherwise, they'll freak out. The 4th one, referring back to matters that we decided upon in the last meeting and relitigating those decisions in chat or Slack or around the water cooler or whatever the case may be, but reopening that stuff we already figured out. And then finally, my personal favorite as someone that works with organizations around the world is multiplying the procedures and clearances involved in things like issuing instructions and paying checks and getting set up as a vendor or an employee, and see that 3 people have to approve everything where 1 person might be sufficient. Show of hands, who's ever seen this behavior at work? Okay, take a look around. Cool. Does anybody know where these ways of working were found? Most people assume that it's from a disturbing corporate ethnography that I did, where I just went around and noticed things that seemed a little Byzantine. But it's actually far worse than that. These are from a guide on how to sabotage a company that was written at the height of World War II. So the head of what was the precursor to the CIA, this gentleman named William Donovan, was told that there were people sympathetic to the Allied cause behind enemy lines and asking, what can I do? What can I do to help? And so they commissioned a study and wrote a guide on how to sabotage from within. And the last chapter of this little book, which you can buy today on Amazon for about $8, by the way, the last chapter of this book listed the things I just read out loud to you verbatim in 1944. This is how we're going to do it. What they told them was, if you do this behavior, you will slow down and grind their economy to a halt. You will ruin it. And somehow, in the space of a single human lifetime, that has gone from obvious sabotage that we use in the midst of a war to 80 to 90% of the hands in the room. So what happened there? What is going on? Well, the impact is substantial. And most people that have been in the workforce long enough have seen this. This data trends over the last 30 years. It moves 1% in either direction every year, but it basically stays the same. And what it looks like is about 1 in 2 people at work is not really happy in their current job. They're looking for something better. Roughly 1 in 2 people is thinking about quitting every other week. So where am I going to go? What am I going to do? Roughly 1 in 2 is not engaged. That means they're working for the weekend. They're doing the job, but they'd rather be working on their golf game. And lastly, 1 in 5 or 6 are actively disengaged, which you can think of as effectively sabotaging the system for entertainment. So these are folks that are like, I'm just going to do what is interesting to me to get ahead, or to stab whoever I have to stab in the back, or to make this interesting by disrupting the system. But I'm actively disengaged. I'm taking action based on how dissatisfied I am with my work experience. And the data comes out every year, but nobody does anything about it. It's just like, oh, yeah, that's the engagement data. But it's really scary. Imagine a dinner party at your house. 100 people come over. 50 of them don't want to be there. They were dragged there by their spouse. 15 of them actively hate your guts. That's a terrible dinner party. And that's the party we're hosting as an economy at large right now. And so it has an impact, right? And when we look at some metrics, we look at the P&L, it's like, oh, I don't see the impact that Aaron's talking about. But if you look at certain data that we don't talk about a lot in culture, it doesn't paint a very rosy picture. So for one thing, average company lifespan is way down and to the right. In 1958, when our parents and grandparents were running the workforce, it was dynastic. If you were on the S&P, you'd be on there for multiple careers of time. And now it's literally a look left, look right. Somebody comes off that list every 2.5 weeks through disruption and through being acquired or pulling a Kodak or whatever the case may be. Same story for ROA. So for those of you with a finance background, return on assets. Also, way down and to the right. Return on assets is how much profit can we make for the stuff that we own as a corporation. And it used to be up in that 4.5–5% range in that same time horizon we just talked about. But at the same time, it's gone down and to the right, and now it's like 1.3%. So somehow, you each have a phone in your hands more powerful than the one that took us to the moon. You can do email at 30,000 feet, but you are less productive. You are less effective at producing return than the people that came before you. How the hell can that be? What is going on? Well, if you ask experts what is going on, if you go talk to economists and academics and say, like, what is it? They point to a million different things. There's a lot of different explanations. It's like asking a doctor why kids have more food allergies today. There's a lot of factors. We're not exactly sure what's going on. But if you go ask people that work the front lines, that run a register, answer a phone, code software that people have to use, run a sales project, whatever it might be, and you say, what's going on? Why are we so unable to produce the outcomes that we want to produce? They all point to the exact same thing. Or rather, they point to these things. It's the red tape, right? It's the red tape. It's the bureaucracy of it all. We have created a rule and a role for everything. There is a boundary for everything, a constraint for everything. And so you get to work and you're like, oh, wow, I have to track my time. And people are ignoring the policies we agreed to. And there are unnecessary layers of managers that don't even need to be here. And we're doing annual planning 9 months of the year. to plan for the next year. There was a period in the 2000s when Ford's annual budgeting process cost more than the GDP of a South American country, just to do the budgeting. So we have a lot that we're contending with. And I have a name for all this stuff. I'm sure y'all could add to this list. It's not hard to start thinking of things that are in the way. But I have a name for this stuff. I call it organizational debt, right? You know about financial debt. You borrow money, you have to pay interest on it. You probably may even know about technical debt. You make choices building software or technology, and later on you have to update and refactor that stuff. Organizational debt is even worse because it's everywhere and nobody talks about it. And it's basically every principle, practice, assumption, norm, pattern, habit, thing that we do at work that is no longer serving us, but that we have not edited, we have not updated. We just do it that way because that's the way we've always done it, right? And there's so many stories of that. You go into an organization, you find out about a meeting they're having that everybody hates. They hate this meeting. Where did this come from? Oh, well, it's the CIO's meeting, so you ask her, where did this come from? Oh, the CIO before me was already having it. I just inherited it and I do it. And then you ask them, where did it come from? And you find eventually a retired CIO that's like, oh yeah, we just were mad on a Sunday that we didn't have data. And so we held a meeting on Monday and it became this strategy rhythm that everyone hates. So we have debt that kind of cascades down the line. And what it does is it holds us back. It causes frustration. It minimizes our ability to solve problems. It gets in the way of our agendas. And you think about the work you're trying to do, you're probably butting up against different forms of organizational debt, assumptions, beliefs, needs, quarterly goals that get in the way of making that happen. Now, this has a cost, this organizational debt, the things we don't need. And some friends of ours have modeled what that cost is by looking in industries and saying, if we look at the policies that everyone, including the policymaker, says are unnecessary, and we look at the roles that everyone agrees are unnecessary, what's the value of all that stuff? And they bundled it together, and the number is staggering. Anybody want to take a guess? It's more than $1 million. It's 3.4 trillion a year. Yeah, that's the value of waste in our system. And if you have ever studied productivity growth, you know that productivity growth at a rate has slowed since World War II. It's kind of started to have diminishing returns. And the amount that it's slowed is roughly this amount. It's 9 trillion globally. So every year at work, we go to work and we do unnecessary stuff and we waste $9 trillion. So what could we do with it? Now, there's a reason that we struggle so much with organizational debt. And the reason is that we misunderstand the difference between these two words. So most organizations, most boardrooms that I go into, I'll say, what's the difference between these two words? And the executives will be like, they mean roughly the same thing. They're both things that consternate us, that have lots of moving parts, that we don't fully understand, and we blame things on these words, right? Why didn't you hit your goals? Well, it's complicated. What's going on in the market? It's extremely complex, right? We use it to explain away our problems. But if you talk to a systems theorist, someone that studies systems for a living, and say, what is the difference between these two words? They're like, oh, they're very different. One of these is a certain type of system, the other is a different type of system. And if you try to treat one like the other, you're going to be frustrated your whole life. And so I thought we would do a master's degree in systems theory in 60 seconds. There will be no certificates. And kind of get on the same page about this stuff. So we're going to do one more pop quiz today. This is a watch. So how many people, by show of hands, think that a watch is a complicated system? How many think it's a complex system? How many are conscientious objectors that just refuse to vote? I see you, I respect you. All right, so then we have the engine. Show of hands for complicated on engine, complex on engine. Okay, let's raise the stakes. Weather, complicated for weather. Few takers, complex, a lot more takers. All right, what about traffic? Complicated, complex? Okay, great, you did what everybody does. About a third of the people vote for one, a third vote for the other, a third sit there and scowl at me. That's totally fine. So let's actually figure this out. So the systems that I first showed you, the watch and the engine, are both complicated systems. And by that I mean that they are causal systems. There's a cause and effect relationship inside their parts and components. And if you have the right expertise, you can fix those systems. You understand the types of problems that are going to show up in them. If you take your car to the dealer and say it's not working, 999 times out of 1,000, they're going to be like, oh yeah, it's a timing belt. We'll fix it. It'll be ready on Monday. That's a complicated system for you. Now, you show me that car, you're not driving this weekend. because I don't know anything about it. I haven't studied that system. I haven't learned how to interact with it. But a complicated system, a problem can be solved, right, by an expert. A complicated system will not surprise an expert. There might be a few ways they can deal with it, but they're not going to be like, oh my God, a clown just jumped out of the manifold. It's another timing belt. The other systems I showed you, weather, traffic, I would add to that list gardens and 6-year-old children, are complex systems. And by that I mean they are dispositional systems. They have an attitude, they have a way they're trending. You can kind of see where this is going, but you can't be exactly sure how it'll play out. People look out at the weather and they go, ooh, looks like rain. And if you ask a meteorologist to predict the weather 2 weeks from now, how will they be at that? Garbage. Why? They know that. We all know that. Why? Because a complex system is fundamentally unpredictable. It has a relationship between its component parts that is too emergent, too chaotic to predict. And so you can only understand the relationship between cause and effect in a system like this after the fact. So as an example, we had the pandemic. The most important and powerful and, in theory, brilliant people in the world are trying to figure out what to do about it. And then the things happened the way they did, right? And a lot of things happened we did not expect. I could send any person in the world, in this room, back to day one of the pandemic, and you could lead the charge, and you would be a better leader for that situation than anyone that was alive at that moment. Because you now know what the relationship is between cause and effect. You now have seen that complex system unfold. In a complex system, problems cannot be solved, they can only be managed. Nobody ever comes in from the garden and says, honey, I fixed the garden. It's done. It's not how gardens work. Nobody ever picks their kid up from school and the teacher says, hey, I fixed your kid. That's not how kids work, right? And in fact, the way you interact with these systems will have unexpected results. You can have two kids, you treat one with a disciplinarian attitude and you're like, you're gonna go to Harvard, and they do. And you treat another one with that same attitude and they join Motley Crue. You cannot be sure what's gonna happen with a complex system. So the way you interact with it is you probe, sense, respond. You try something rather than trying to analyze it or figure it out. You just try something. You poke the bear and you see what it does. And based on what happens, then you rinse and repeat. It's why we talk about test and learn as the main modality of work today, because we deal with so many complex systems. And so these complex systems, they have problems that can't be solved, they can only be managed. Now, the question is, now that you understand the difference between these two systems, and you see that one probably won't surprise us and one will, what does it mean for work? And what it means for work is that we have a fundamental mismatch. We treat everything that we do at work as if it is a complicated problem, as if we're on that factory floor still, because the way we work was invented on a factory floor. Almost everything that we do, from the roles we hold, to the org charts that we use, to the Gantt charts we use to plan projects, to the budgeting we do, was invented before 1920 in a factory. Why? Because they needed to figure out how to make sure that every box of cornflakes was crunchy and every shoe that was a size 9 fit the same. These were problems of scale and consistency. How do we create consistent, reliable results that are more efficient and ultimately more effective? And honestly, a lot of those approaches worked pretty well. I mean, my shoes do fit, and so I appreciate that. However, today, most of the problems we face at work, and certainly the problems you all face in your roles, are fundamentally complex. They're intractable problems. They're social problems. They're problems with multiple stakeholders. They're not problems where you're like, oh, it's a timing belt, we're done. And yet, we use checklist after checklist and Gantt chart after Gantt chart and meeting after meeting and org chart after org chart to try to solve these problems. I don't know how many boardrooms I've walked into where they're like, look, Dignan, we created new corporate values and behaviors. We put them on coffee mugs and posters all throughout the world, and no one's behaving differently. What gives? And I'm like, you're Homer Simpson's dad shouting at the weather. Like, that's not how these systems work. You can't yell at the garden. It's not going to do what you say. It doesn't care what posters you put up. So we have a mismatch, which means we need to change how we work. We need to change what I call our operating system. And so the operating system is nothing more than the foundational beliefs, assumptions, principles, and practices that shape our way of working. So you think about every room you go into has a set of assumptions, right? This room has all this modular furniture. So what are they assuming? We're going to have to reconfigure this room. You walk into the boardroom at a Fortune 100 company, that table is nailed to the ground. Because what are we going to do in here? We're going to sit and have some long meetings in here. That's the assumption. And so everything is built around that assumption. And the assumptions that we hold shape the systems that we create. So the best example of this that I have is about the intersection. So you have two roads crossing. The goal when two roads cross is to make sure we maximize throughput, so the most cars per hour that we can get through, while minimizing accidents. That's the problem we have to solve. And what you see here are two different operating systems, two different OSs for solving that problem. The one on the left is the lighted, stoplight signal controlled intersection. The one on the right is the roundabout. Now, they have different assumptions about people in the problem. What do we assume about people in the problem in the lighted intersection? I leave it to you. They'll stop at the red. Yeah, certainly people will follow the instructions. What else? They know the instructions. They know the rules. They'll follow the rules. What else? What's that? The lights will change. Yeah, it's either or. My favorite way to describe this one is they need to be told what to do. The main assumption is we better tell these people what to do because they're coming to this intersection, and if we don't tell them, there's going to be pandemonium. So what we'll do is we'll build an apparatus to tell people what to do. Red light, green light, yellow light, turn signal, stop sign, whatever. My favorite thing about this one is that there is a little stop sign there on that black sign. You can't totally see it, but there's a stop sign and a stoplight. Who knows what to do with that? What are the assumptions about people in the problem on the right-hand side with the roundabout? They'll figure it out. That's exactly how I say it. So they'll figure it out means they're going to come to this intersection and there's not going to be someone directing traffic. They're just going to have to do what we call social coordination. Social coordination is what happens when a bunch of people try to get in an elevator at the same time, right? It's like, oh, please, after you. There are two different approaches here. And I like to look at these as polarities, right? We have the need to be told and the they'll figure it out solution, two different operating systems. And they represent two different polarities on the spectrum of how we can design anything at work, from a vacation policy to a strategy process to a hiring process. There is the control and compliance end of that spectrum, which is where we try to make sure that everything is exactly as we predict. And there's a trust and autonomy end of the spectrum where it's like, you figure it out. I trust you, right? And there's everything in between. And so my argument is not that everything at work should be all the way to the right. My argument is that there is a palette of colors to paint with. And we can have a little bit more fun with that, Bob Ross style, if we actually stop for a moment and ask ourselves, is the way we're currently doing this actually serving us? So we have trust and autonomy, we have control and compliance, two different spectrums, two different operating systems in this case. And now we can ask ourselves the question of which one is safer? Well, the roundabout is safer. It reduces fatal collisions by 90%. Which one do you think has higher throughput? More cars per hour. Roundabout, yep, I agree. 89% reduction in delays. Which one's cheaper to build and maintain? Roundabout, 5 to 10K cheaper to build and maintain. And which one works better when the lights and the power go out? The roundabout, more normal during outages, more resilient as a system, right? And which one do we have 1,113 times more of in the United States? The light. Now, it's not that all lights are bad. I love lights. I've been driving in lights for 30 years. It's great. But there are situations where lights aren't best. And the question is, are there 1,000 times more situations where lights are best? No. We're just more comfortable in them. We're more used to them. We have the light lobby that's trying to make the light thing happen, right? We have all these forces, all this org debt working against us. And when we do get in a roundabout, people are often like, whoa, I feel uncomfortable. Why? Because when you're at the stoplight, you get to check out. You get to check your phone, call your spouse, zone out, do whatever you want to do. You're not present in the problem. But when you're in the roundabout, because it runs on social coordination, you are present in the problem. It is on you to manage. And in fact, the two rules of the roundabout are go with the flow of traffic and give right-of-way to people in the circle. Right-of-way is very negotiable. So you get to decide how you're going to play the game, right? And there are even people that I've met in some roundabouts who are playing the game of how many lanes is this? And that's okay. So we have this difference, and folks are like, man, I just feel like so much more stressed. I worry about everyone else in those systems. But here we see that they're safer and better in a lot of circumstances. So there's something about what we can achieve when we run on a different operating system that is not as easy as what we know, but is fundamentally higher performance. And that's really what we have to contend with. And the operating system that we use at work is not about lights. It's not about cars. It's about these things. So when we did the research for the book, we went out and talked to organizations that work differently and are really well known for the level of excellence that they have in terms of the human experience, the social experience, the governance performance of their system, and said, what's different about you? And they said, oh, well, we meet differently, we decide differently, we pay differently, we form teams differently, we give feedback differently. And every time they said something, we wrote it down and pinned it on the wall. And eventually we saw these clusters start to form. And these were the clusters. These are the areas where work is changing most rapidly at the edge. If you want to know what people are doing to innovate the way we work, this is where they're playing. And what this is, this operating system canvas, is a mirror that you can look at to say, what do we believe and what do we do? So if you look at something like authority, what do we believe? Well, I walk into the boardroom and they say, authority, whew, we believe in empowerment here. We're a very empowering culture. So you'll see that as you walk around. And then I get in the elevator with some kids that are 25 and I'm like, how's the empowerment culture here? And they're like, pfft. So there's a disconnect between what we say and what we do. And then in some cases, there isn't a disconnect, but we're not getting what we need. So I'm like, oh, what do you believe about resource allocation and budgeting? I believe we should take budgeting very seriously, Aaron. Okay, and do you do that? Oh, yes, we do. It takes 9 months every year to do it. And is that serving you? I'm not sure if it is serving us, right? I'm not sure how accurate it is when it can change on a dime. When we had a plan for the year and then suddenly COVID happens and now our plan is rubbish, I'm not sure what the value is. So this confronts us and asks us to reconsider those things. And that means that we can then decide where we want to play, where we want to experiment. So there are 3 companies that I brought today out of the 68 that we studied for the book that have done some of that experimentation, some of that playing with their operating system, in some cases from their founding and in some cases later on. The first is Buurtzorg. So Buurtzorg is a Dutch healthcare system. It's a home nursing organization that works with a lot of recovery care. And in Europe, particularly in the Netherlands where they're based, a lot of that healthcare happens at home. So there isn't a hospital system that brings people always to the inpatient. There's a lot of outpatient care. And the person that started this organization is a nurse by the name of Joost de Black. And his perspective was, a nurse is a calling. I feel called to help people and to help them become well again. And I'm in this system where everything is measured down to the second and the milligram, and I have to be with patients for 4.5 minutes, and then I have to get back in the car and go to the next thing. And he's like, I'm not going to do that anymore. So he started Buurtzorg, and the rule with Buurtzorg was every community has a team of nurses that work in that community, and that team of nurses will decide how they work, what they do, what they charge, how it all goes down. It's up to them to self-govern and create their own community relationship. And they've gone from Joost, one person, to 15, to 1,500, to 15,000 nurses today. 15,000 nurses in groups of 10 to 12, self-managing their relationship with their community. And the head office for this company is 50 people. 50 people serving 15,000, and 35 of those folks are coaches who have no authority. So essentially 15 people centrally running the entire organization while 15,000 go to work. They save the Dutch healthcare system almost 800 million euros a year. Why? Because their patients recover faster and stay healthy longer. Ernst & Young did a study to see how it compared if you had a Buurtzorg system versus a traditional European healthcare system. And on every measure they could find, Buurtzorg was better or the same as the traditional system, but without all the stopwatches. And interestingly, whenever they go into a new market, the talent immediately leaches away from the other organizations, because why would you be a nurse in a stopwatch healthcare system when you can be a nurse at Buurtzorg? So it's a really interesting example of how these systems can turn if you start with the right principles. The second example is Haier. So Haier is a Chinese appliance manufacturer. Some of you may even have a Haier appliance, or maybe you have a GE appliance and they own them now. And interestingly, about 5 years ago, the CEO, Shang, was looking at the system. He's like, man, we are so disconnected from customer that I'm concerned, because the Internet of Things and the future of home appliances is going to be fast moving and interesting and very technological. And here we have these huge functions, HR, finance, customer service, marketing, product development, and none of them really know who their customer is. And none of them really know who our end customer is. So what they did is they blew the company up into 2,000 units of 10 to 30 people. They call them ZZJYTs, which was a Chinese acronym for basically small autonomous team. And these teams were given total authority over their own P&L. This is your customer, this is your product or service, this is your P&L, it's your show. Like, you do what you need to do. It's sink or swim. It's very entrepreneurial. And then they decided they were actually going to start electing their own leaders. And so every year, each of those ZZJYTs would start electing from among their ranks their own leaders for the year in terms of their vision and strategy for what should happen. And then they started implementing a bit of a vote with your feet model, where if you're working on microwave A and you think it's a dog product, you can literally just walk away and go to another P&L if they'll have you, if their budget can hold you. And you don't have to go to HR to get approval for that. You just need the two cells to talk to each other. And that way, products that are not that successful or that interesting, they start to decay and go away. And new products that are working really well start to grow and grab talent. It's a marketplace of talent moving across this entrepreneurial system of over 2,000 bets. And they bought GE Appliances in distress. GE Appliances had had a 10-year slide of profit and revenue growth. It had all been going backwards. They bought it and they implemented this model there over the course of about 18 months and had their first profit and revenue growth in a decade. It was almost instantaneous. Not without its disruptions, but pretty profoundly powerful. They went from that 60,000 person organization with all those big functions to that 2,000 unit system, and now they're close to 100,000 people and close to 5,000 ZZJYTs. It's the fastest growing appliance manufacturer in human history. It is absolutely blowing the doors off, and they're moving into new areas. So when somebody wants to create a new product or a new idea, they actually have a policy where you go to a Chinese venture capitalist, you pitch your idea for the new fridge or computer or service or whatever it might be. If they fund you, Hire will match it. And now you have a war chest to go start to poach people with. And so it is this massive innovation economy. So that's Hire. Very, very interesting at scale to see something like that happening. And then the last example is my personal favorite. And we actually had David on the show on the Brave New Work podcast recently. And this is the USS Santa Fe. This is a nuclear sub with nuclear weapons aboard. So one of my favorite pushbacks I get from audiences is often, this is all sounding well and good, Aaron, but when we make mistakes, people die. So we can't do any of the stuff you're talking about. And that's when I love to bring up the sub. Because if you're on a nuclear reactor 600 feet below the water with nuclear weapons aboard, that feels pretty high stakes to me. And what was interesting about David's situation is he was training for a different boat, a different ship. And these are very complicated systems. And now you know what I mean when I say that. They're very complicated systems, 2 million parts. Prepared for ship A. Suddenly captain says, here's the problem, David. The USS Santa Fe is the worst performing ship in the fleet. We need you to take it over. We need you to turn it around and fix it. And you're not allowed to fire anyone on board. So he's like, ruh-roh, that sounds really hard. So he lands on the ship. He starts barking orders because he's been trained his whole naval career to make orders, right? I'm the commander. It's in the name, command. So he starts barking orders. And his junior officers occasionally are like, Captain Marquette, we don't have that button on this ship, though. So you said to hit the red button, but we don't have the red button. And he starts to realize he's been preparing for ship A. He's on ship B. He doesn't know it well enough to run it. He does not know the ship well enough to run it. So he calls everyone together. He says, instead of me giving terrible orders over and over again, what are we going to do? We got to turn this around. I can't fire any of you. What are we going to do? And one of the junior officers says, what if instead of giving bad orders, you didn't give orders at all? And he was like, insubordination. And then after an hour, he was like, no, I kind of like that. And so they tried what he now calls intent-based leadership, which means when you come to him for orders, he asks, what do you intend to do? And the first time he said that, everybody's like, no one's ever asked me that before. Well, when you know what you intend to do, come back. And so people started to think for themselves, what do I intend to do? Well, I intend to dock and refuel and then head out 70 degrees starboard and do this training exercise. And he would say, very well. He always said, very well. If it was an even remotely cogent decision, very well. The only decision he reserved for himself was whether to fire. That's it. When we fire, I'll make that call. Everything else, what do you intend to do? And they practiced. And as they practiced, they realized we don't even know what good looks like. We're making all these decisions, but what does good look like? So they built a competency model. What does good performance for our ship look like to us, not to the Navy? And then when they saw that, they're like, oh, shit. We're not going to achieve that level of performance if we don't have real-time data flowing across the ship all the time. Because they do these elaborate war games where they have to compete in simulations and do everything perfectly. We need information flowing in real time. So they completely ripped out the whole chain of command on the ship in terms of information flows and put in a central nervous system that everybody had all the information at the same time. And then they practiced. 2 years later, it was the top performing ship in the fleet without a single soul change. The D team became the A team. It went from worst to first. To this day, it's produced more officers than any other ship in naval history. Why? Because everyone's an officer on that ship. You have to be. in order to operate. So that is what's possible in a high-stakes situation. Now, and I get to this point in the talk, people are usually like, hey, I love it, I'll buy the t-shirt, but here's the problem for us, change doesn't work. And I agree. 80 to 90% of change management efforts fail based on the data. In fact, if you try to do a change management effort at work that will supposedly affect the people on the front lines, the same odds of that being successful from their perspective are the odds you face at the blackjack table in Vegas on your first hand trying to get blackjack. So when you do change management at scale, trying to affect the edge, you are playing blackjack, one hand, with people's lives. That doesn't seem like a great way to do change management. So we actually need to change how we think about change. And this is the traditional model, right? Change is something that happens to you, and it sucks. And you have to resist and fight, and then finally you get it, and now you're 5% better. And if you have a lot of money, if you're one of those Fortune 1000 companies that can hire the best of the best, your change management process will look like this. It's the exact same chart, but now you get 3 dimensions, you get eagles, you get a bridge, and some flags. Also, they don't hold a very high opinion of you because a bunch of you are just falling for no reason into the money pit. So that's not a great way to do it. So instead, we need to change how we change. And we talk about this at the Ready and at Murmur as the continuous participatory change process. It's a long mouthful, but it's the best words for the job. Continuous means we're not doing this every 3 years when a new EVP is hired. We are changing in small ways all the time. Why? Because we're an adaptive system in a complex environment. And we should not be waiting for the next executive to come in before we change and adapt our roles and our policies and our processes and the way we relate to each other. We should be doing that all the time, just like we do in our actual lives. Whenever we see an opportunity to make something better, we jump on that thing. The second word is participatory. What does that mean? It means that we're changing through them, not to them. So we're actually inviting people to participate in the change. And when I say invite, I mean invite. We're not mandating. We're saying, who is interested in trying this experiment? Raise your hands, right? We're actually inviting people to play. And the way we do this continuous participatory change is through this loop, very simple loop. First, we identify attention. What is holding us back? The question I always ask is, what is stopping you or your team from doing the best work of your lives? It's the only question you need. I can save you an MBA in management. The only question you need at work is, what's stopping us from doing the best work of our lives? You ask that question to the people that work with, around, and for you, and they'll tell you the answer. And the answer is org debt, and it needs to be eradicated. It needs to be invented around. And the way we do that is we start to identify alternative practices. So you said that our budgeting process is killing you. So you said that we're having too many meetings. So you said that you're getting buried in email. So you said that you're not clear what our priorities are. Great. What are some alternative ways of doing that that might move us forward, that are intriguing to us? You can find those by looking at outside companies like Bertsorg and the USS Santa Fe. You can find those by looking at internal teams. Almost every organization I've ever been to has 1 or 2 teams where people are like, man, they really have something going on over there. I don't know what they're eating, but it looks tasty. So there are ways to go look for those practices. Once you find something that you want to try, then you can design a safe to try, safe to fail experiment. How will we actually go find out? And the thing I always say here is do a radical thing at a non-radical scale. Almost all org change in the world is non-radical thing at a radical scale. We're going to move everyone around on the org chart, but not really change anything. And it'll be terrible again in 3 months. That's non-radical change, radical scale. Radical change, non-radical scale means I want you to take one small group of 40 people and change the way they do feedback or the way they pay each other or the way they make decisions in a fundamentally disruptive way that is radical enough that you are nervous to try it, but the scale of the experiment is small enough that if it doesn't work, it won't kill you. And as a result, if it doesn't work, it didn't kill you, so you can move on and learn. And if it does work, the implications are profound because now you can actually expand this the way Bertsorg did from 1 team to 2,000 teams, right? You're seeing that ability to implement. So that's what continuous participatory change looks like. It means tuning in, sensing what's holding us back, identifying alternatives, which is about going out and looking, paying attention, and then trying something that if it works will materially change the game. And you do this in and on the business all the time. We want every team at every level to be playing this game. This is not for leaders to tell others to do. This is for everyone to do. This is just what it is to operate in complexity anymore. We're all org designers. That's our second job, is building the conditions, the operating system upon which we flourish. Now, I'll finish with one very quick story, which is the story of the high jump. So this is how the high jump was done for decades. And in the 60s, the early 60s, this is how it was done. Now, for the men in the audience, you can see how very precarious this was. And they had to do it this way because the other side of the pole was dirt. So you had to land on your feet. And if you didn't land on your feet, you would be injured, right? So you got to go over head first. And there were a bunch of different names for this, the Western scissor and the this roll and different ways of doing it. But it's all head first and forwards, land on your feet. And then suddenly in the 60s, new synthetics and foams came on the market and the rules changed. And suddenly there's a pad on the other side. And this high school student, Dick Fosbury, starts going over head first and backwards. And his coaches are like, that is super weird, Dick. Like, cut it out. And then he went to the University of Oregon and he started working on the track team there. And they were like, Dick, please cut it out. We need to win some track meets. Stop going over head first and backwards. And so he tried to do it the regular way. And he was so bad at it that finally they caved and they're like, fine, do it your way. So he starts going over head first and backwards. And suddenly the height starts going up and up and up and up. And in 1968, he went to the Olympics and won the gold medal and broke the Olympic world record for the high jump, going over head first and backwards and landing on that pad. And most people tell this story to talk about think different, fly your freak flag, you're all beautiful snowflakes. That's a wonderful message, but that is not why we're here. I'm actually here to tell you about something that nobody talks about, which is what did the other competitors say when they saw Dick win and break the record? And if you go back and you comb through the microfiche, as I have done, they actually will say, you know what? It works for Dick, but it won't work for us. God bless him. He's a freak. He's a weirdo. He's got different anatomy. Our culture, our training regimen, our bodies, they won't do what he just did. They were unwilling to accept that it might be relevant to them. But here's the odd thing. From that moment forward, only one person has ever held the high jump world record doing it any way other than the Fosbury flap. It has a name. It's so good. And it's alliterative, which I appreciate. The Fosbury flap, no one else, the one guy that held it that was not that was really, really tall. So back to context and whether we need roundabouts or stoplights. Context matters. But yeah, his way was demonstrably better. And now everyone does it Dick's way. But at the moment, they couldn't see it. And when I give this talk around the world, the first reaction I get from folks is like, oh, very exciting stuff. Here's the problem, though. Our regulators, we're not Google, we're not a technology company, my manager is an ass, whatever it is, there's a reason why they can't do it, right? There's a reason why it doesn't apply to them. And in reality, if you're complexity conscious, if you understand the complexity of it all, you have to admit that I don't know whether it'll work for them or not. I can't be sure because the only way to find out, remember, is to probe, sense, respond. But they don't know either. Because the only way to find out is to probe, sense, respond. So we're sitting here having an argument that's pointless when we could actually just try something. And going over head first and backwards is scary. It's pretty awkward feeling the first time. But once you get the hang of it, it's demonstrably better. And that's the exciting opportunity that we're presented with today. Our way of working is 120 years old. We are in a different context. And this is the moment, if we want to achieve all of our actual goals, around CSR, around ESG, around culture, around how we treat each other, around growth, et cetera, we got to jump. And that's what I came here to say. So thanks. All right. There's no fire, but.
Just pretend there's a fire, some ambiance here going on. So. Yeah. First of all, thank you. Fascinating conversation. I thought it was very intriguing for me personally. I had a lot of takeaways. This is a conversation that we've actually been having within our organization, I think, at a lot. And I want to give a shout out to Andrea Miller, who's here in the audience. She was the co-chair of this event last year. And Andrea actually leads our change work at Delta Dental of Colorado. And so she and I definitely have had some conversations on this.
Sweet.
So a little bit for me, just in context, is I have two roles. I serve as the Chief Brand and Impact Officer for Delta Dental of Colorado, which is an insurance company. And I also serve as Executive Director for Delta Dental Colorado Foundation.
Okay.
And I feel like it's two separate hats. One with the insurance company that is very rooted in our goals, our deliverables, how we operate somewhat like a machine in order to make sure that those claims get processed and that we're able to kind of serve our customer needs. Another is the foundation, which I feel like as a team, we very much are of the mindset that we have to understand our communities and we have to be able to respond to that. And so there's a dichotomy there. And sometimes I wear the wrong hat in each organization because I forget what I'm supposed to be doing. So I wonder if you can help me out by starting with leadership. In terms of leadership, what are the biggest challenges you see for leaders today in creating organizations that achieve the type of work that you're talking about?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is just the misunderstanding. So for a long time, the job of a leader was reliable, consistent performance and execution, right? Make it work. You have to achieve this goal. The good leader is going to come in and make that goal happen. And that is what we are expected to do, is just that kind of produce that safety, that consistency, that reliability, that certainty of outcome. And it was kind of a take the hill mentality. But as you move into a more and more complex environment, and we've actually seen this with the military and the way they run teams, it actually moves. The job of the leader is no longer to ensure performance. It's actually to ensure consistently growing capability. So the job is the team more capable today than it was yesterday, regardless of me? And in order to pull that off, you actually have to change your mindset about failure. Because in an ensure performance leadership mentality, failure is unacceptable. We have to stop failure before it happens. In a continually growing capability model, we actually want people to do safe to fail failure so that they learn and build their competence and build their confidence and their understanding of the nuances of the job. So it's a little bit like parenting in the sense that if you try to stop every skinned knee, you will not create a wonderful athlete or a healthy adult. You actually want to let them go just to the edge of, this is safe to try, safe to fail, and that's not. So do I let my kid play on the roof? No. But do I let my kid accidentally fall down and get injured? Yeah, I kind of have to. It sucks, but I kind of have to do that. And so I think the same thing is going on with this leadership transition, where if the goal is capability, what you're really doing is setting the table for conditions where teams will try and perform and sometimes fail and sometimes succeed, but over time get better and better and stronger and stronger.
Thank you. I definitely agree with that, especially too as a parent. I'm going to take that back to my wife and just let her know that when my kids are crying and I'm not necessarily, making them go through it, that's a good thing. One of the things I wonder too is, in terms of conditioning, do you feel like there are a lot of people working in environments that have operated within this kind of more complicated fashion of, this is my job and I know what to do, versus people who are comfortable with operating in an environment where they have a responsibility? And do you see that maybe there are some obstacles to overcome in terms of how a lot of our folks are conditioned to work in the corporate world?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, the conditioning has a huge impact, right? So if you've spent 30 years in a system that prioritizes individual performance and reliability and risk avoidance, and then you're like, hey, be different, they're not gonna accommodate that very, very well. So there is a period of unlearning, and it's wild to watch, actually, if you sort of invite someone into this work starting with their tension or their problem, and then watch them have some success and see them start to open up. It's really, really interesting. And so usually when I'm advising teams about how to enlist people that maybe are less interested in this stuff on face value, is just to ask them the question: what's stopping you from doing the best work of your life? Or what's stopping your team from doing the best work of its life? And everybody has an answer, whether they're progressive or regressive, and then say, oh, that's interesting. Could we do an experiment to move that forward for you? And I'll help. And now they start to see the progress, and then things open up. And I have had people that were the most resistant, very obstinate, very headstrong folks, 6 months later, be the biggest advocates, because as it turns out, their actual personality trait is conviction, not what they're convicted about. And so they can actually shift and become a huge advocate, but they have to go through that awakening, that experience. And that means inviting them to the right party that they're willing to go to.
Interesting. And I think with that, there was a term that I've heard not too long ago called hippo managers. Are you familiar with this?
Highest paid person's opinion?
Well, the term I actually heard was about the way a hippo is designed, to where a hippo can come up just above the surface level of water, and they can breathe and they can see and they can hear, all while just doing kind of the bare minimum of getting involved. And so I wonder, in terms of that concept as a manager, what is the role as a manager in being involved with that team? And how does a manager be effective? Is it simply about being a coach? Is it making sure that the process is moving effectively? And how involved or active and what does that involvement actually look like for an effective manager in these systems?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm always skeptical of management in general. So I always take a beat to say, what are we actually trying to solve for? And one of the things that's interesting about the manager role or the CEO role is I don't actually think it exists. It's a set of individual roles that have been grabbed together. So you say, what is the CEO's job? Well, it's fundraiser, head recruiter, relationship to the analysts in the market. You get a whole bunch of things on that list, but each of those independently could be done by different people. We just have chosen to grab them all together. And the same thing is true for a manager. You said coaching, that's one job of the manager. So what I tend to do is look at each individual need, coaching, mentorship, prioritization, strategy, et cetera, and say, what is the best way for this group of people to do that thing? And if it is through a single person in that role, great. We elect people that lead all sorts of things for our companies, but we elect them. They are removable. It is not a position of power that has 360 power. It is within that domain. So if somebody is a coach, they're a coach. If somebody is, a strategy setter, they're a strategy, but they're not always part and parcel. So I think you just have to think about kind of breaking apart and atomizing the work of management, the work of leadership to figure out what's the best way to do each of these things. And then that might look like a manager. It might look like something else completely, depending on the situation.
One other question I have is there's some organizations that I feel like have tried to go down this path and may have failed. Zappos is one that comes to mind that I've seen a lot of things written about.
Oh, yeah.
Can you maybe speak to that model or another one and maybe where their missteps were, or if it maybe just wasn't a fit for what they were trying to accomplish as a company?
Sure. Yeah, lots of organizations fail at this. And usually the way that plays out is that they get so overzealous about wanting to do it that they try to mandate it and force it to happen, which is what Tony did. And then the forcing creates a lack of invitation and a lack of openness and more of a clenched posture in the workforce. And then they do finally sort of roll over to it, but they're not true believers. And then worst of all, when they hit the dip, because every team that does this hits a dip where you are investing in these new ways of working, you're making decisions differently, you're allocating resources differently, you're out over your skis. And there's a period where performance actually goes down a little bit because you're trying something new. It's like if I told you to run differently, run backwards instead of forwards, you'd be like, I'm not going to run as fast for a while. And so there's this period of adjustment. And then the teams that actually follow through start to go up this wild climb to the high performance. And we see it time and time again where folks either mess up that beginning invitation or they hit the dip and they freak out and they start to go back to those old patterns and they clutch those patterns of, I'm just gonna have to grab the reins and tell everybody what to do because we didn't hit the quarter, and now I'm gonna get histrionic about it. And the reality is, the really successful leaders that we see, like a Shang or a Yos, they are so convicted about the principles that they will tie themselves to the mast over this stuff. They're just like, we're gonna slowly get here. We're not going back. It's the level of conviction you see in like Patagonia, right? Where it's just like, this is how we operate, even in the face of all the norms. And we're just going to play this out. And so the leaders that do best in our work that we see are the ones where they're like, I believe in transparency, full stop. I don't care what happens. We're going to be transparent. And then we invite people into that experiment slowly and progressively until we have the whole organization playing that game with us and people opt in and out.
One thing that we've experienced, or I think every organization experiences when you're dealing with things like change management, and it probably has to do with the traditional concept in terms of how we look at it, is burnout.
Oh, yeah.
And with this model that you're looking at here, where you're kind of constantly employing continuous improvement or constantly engaging in change as part of the organization mentality, do you see burnout as a component where people are taking on newer roles and newer degrees of kind of constantly having to reevaluate how they do things as a potential pitfall as we go through this model?
Yes, there's so much burnout happening right now. For a bunch of reasons. I think, to me, the burnout is the opportunity, not the consequence. Because if we're burned out, I can ask, why are we burned out? And when we talk about why we're burned out, that's the subject of a new experiment. These experiments don't have to be energetically costly, right? They can actually give you time and energy back. So we've done experiments where we just get rid of a meeting or get rid of a policy. It doesn't cost anybody any energy at all. They're like, our vacation policy is wildly Byzantine and wastes a lot of time, and ultimately we just think we trust everybody. Cool, delete it for 6 months and see what happens. We deleted it. Now we're done with the experiment, and now we just wait for 6 months and see what happens. That's not energetically costly. You do have to have high conviction to try it, but it doesn't hold you back. And many of the teams that we work with immediately get time back, like 10 to 15 hours a week back within a few months, where they're now sort of swimming in the luxury of all that space and wondering, what do I actually do now? And they have an identity crisis about being a manager who has 15 hours a week that are completely unoccupied. And the answer is, maybe you could do an actual job now. What are you actually good at? What's your craft? So I think that's the pattern that we look for. So yeah, burnout is very real. If you overdo it on the experiments, you can be, stretched too thin. And I think the first thing I would say is, like, if that's what's holding us back, let's shut down one of these, let's react to that burnout rather than let it be the thing that is the result of our learning muscle.
All right, let's give Aaron another round of applause. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Abid. Great chat.
All right, well, is this on? Not on? Can you guys hear me? Okay, good. Well, that was, I think, a powerful way to start our day and the learning that we have before us. And so thank you so much for those remarks. It was very timely for me. We're having a lot of these conversations at our organization, and I'm actually going on our senior leadership team retreat, which is probably, you shouldn't even be doing those things in this kind of environment. But yeah, I think I'm going to take away a lot and bring that back to my team. So I thank you all for being here at the Be Civic Summit. I'm excited to be here at this event again, and Delta Dental of Colorado is proud to sponsor this again. I wanted to give you guys a little bit about our company at Delta Dental of Colorado. We are a nonprofit insurance company with a focus on providing dental coverage, and we have about over 1.5 million members in the state of Colorado. Our mission drives our work, and central to our mission is our foundation, which serves as the important philanthropic arm for the company. The mission of the foundation is to advance oral health equity across the state of Colorado. And earlier this year in January, Delta Dental of Colorado announced a $7 million contribution in grants to organizations across the state of Colorado. And I'm proud today, as we've just finalized another slate of grants worth $11 million for a total of $18 million that we've committed to nonprofit organizations for our mission between 2022 and the end of 2024. Our foundation also offers low-interest loans for capital projects in the event that an organization wants to build a new clinic or operatory. We also have some terrific statewide evaluation and data resources that we're developing and democratizing to make oral health data more accessible to nonprofit organizations across the state. And on top of that, we're really starting to kick off our policy work, which is at the core of everything we try to do at the foundation, which is focus on systems change. How do we do grants? How do we fail fast? How do we learn from what's working and what's not working? And then how do we try to use that data to inform policy making for us going forward? And so that's how we operate. On top of that, we have our company. When I started at the company, Andrea and I met, and we set a goal that we wanted to be the most socially responsible company in the state of Colorado. As a nonprofit company, we had roots and origins in doing a lot of this work, but we knew we really had to advance our entire operation in the areas of opportunity and investment. I'm proud to say that since that time, we've achieved significant advancements in a number of areas. Our inclusion and diversity work has been a priority for our board and our company since I started in 2022. We launched our I&D Council. We just completed our first 15-month I&D action plan. And just recently, we just presented this to one of our board committees last night. We completed our first self-identify campaign to help us get better data so that we can respond to and work with our team members and understand the differences and complexities that we have within our organization. We designed a new office space with sustainability in mind, and we set a goal back in 2020 on Earth Day that we wanted to be certified carbon neutral by the end of 2023. We're well on our way towards that goal. We work with a local company called Acclimate to help us identify our entire carbon footprint and also purchase local carbon offsets in Colorado. And we do a lot of team member education to improve our behaviors internally so that our people can be more sustainable in their practice, both at work and at home. On top of that, we've also focused a lot on team member engagement. And each of the past 3 years, we've increased our team member volunteerism as well as our team member philanthropy. We offer a number of matches and incentives, including a 2-to-1 match on Colorado Gives Day. And that's the last thing I wanted to mention to you all today. Delta Dental of Colorado is a proud sponsor of Colorado Gives Day, which is a huge philanthropic effort in the state of Colorado. Last year alone on Colorado Gives Day, we raised $55 million for our nonprofit organizations. And this year, we definitely want to beat that. And so we are sponsoring the Colorado Gives Day Corporate Challenge. And this is an opportunity specifically for businesses to get more involved in Colorado Gives Day. We've designed and created a new portal specifically designed for companies to engage their team members. In this portal, you can promote your own nonprofit organizations that you as a company care about. You can also have opportunities for team members to share where they give back. I would say the most impactful component for Colorado Gives Day for us as a team was hearing all the stories about the organizations people give to and why they give to it. And having that one day to really celebrate and promote all the different stories about all the different causes and why people are passionate about those causes was deeply impactful. And it's something we hope to replicate and promote even further this year. So I would like to encourage all of you to visit coloradogives.org to check out this new site that's been developed. And there's a whole section for businesses. And in that section, you can get a toolkit on how you can create your own internal campaign and some of the lessons we learned at Delta Dental of Colorado, as well as other companies. And then you can sign up to create your own page. And we're offering a special incentive for the first 100 companies that do sign up, that you'll get, if you sign up and you're able to get $1,000 in contributions, Delta Dental of Colorado will match those $1,000 for the first 100 companies to do so. So please do look at the site and please do get involved and sign up your company. We have 33 days until Colorado Gives Day, which is on December 6th. So you can create your page now, you can start your giving pledges now, and then on Colorado Gives Day, hopefully you can have some really great engagement and get your people involved in philanthropy. So with that, let's move on to the first workshop block. So we have our first workshop block coming up next. We'll have our featured sessions. One is on EY Ripples, setting CSR in motion globally in the Cripple Creek Room 1, ESG Reporting 101 in the Cripple Creek 2 room, and here in the ballroom is Politics Meet CSR, 8 tips on when and how to respond. These workshops will start at 10 a.m., so you have 9 minutes for a quick break, use a restroom, grab some more coffee, and mingle with your fellow attendees. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys later today.